how to build a free CRM in Notion. For context, I want to show you the CRM that I actually use, that I've built in Notion, and then I'll get into a blank page and show you how you can build something like this, not quite as advanced, but how to build it from scratch, from a blank page in Notion. So here on my screen is my main operating system, as it's called. And if I scroll down here, you'll see I have got a page here in my main menu called Contacts. Okay. Now inside of this is just that, is my contacts. And right here in the first tab, you have some people I've labeled as super friends. These are people I talk to or want to talk to very frequently. Okay. Here you have contact cards. You're going to see a lot of information blurred out here, like phone numbers and email addresses. But this is where I have the people that I talk to and people who are in my system here organized in a card layout. Here's a table of contacts, right? Kind of like a table of contents, but this is a list of people. And you'll see even here I've got a status. You know, some of these are clients, some are just colleagues, people I work with, some are friends, right? And some are family, right? And then, like I said, I have super friends, and some I have listed here as vendors. And over here what you're seeing is when you create a database like this in Notion, you can configure it to show up to a certain number, and then to see more you can click here where it says load more. This conserves space and so on. And finally, I have a view here that's called Stay in Touch, and this is based on people that I want to stay in touch with, and I have a date field for that that lets me know this is when I plan to contact them next. And if, as was the case there, I'm well past that last date and don't have a need to contact them at any specific time in the near future, I remove that. So these are all views of a single database, just carved up with different filters and other things to limit what I'm seeing and make it easy to manage my contacts, right? Now I can click into any one of these, because each of these is, as everything is in Notion, just a page. And every page in Notion is potentially a whole world, a whole universe of information that you can capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage with. In this case, based on everything you would need to know about any person that you would have in your contacts, right? Now, one of the things you didn't see, because I don't use this right now for this purpose, is the CRM-like statuses. So let's say this person whom I'm working with was a prospective client. Then for statuses, I have prospect hot and prospect cold. Obviously, it's pretty straightforward what this means. If somebody's a new prospect and I want to follow up with them frequently, they're a hot lead, then I choose prospect hot. Cold means I haven't heard back from them and they're probably on the verge of me marking them as being sort of done, which is down here under the complete section, you know, prospect lost. I have something specific for that. So that gives you a sense of what I've got set up here. But now what I want to do, as I promised, is show you how to build your own CRM from a blank page. Something like this, but not quite as sophisticated and deep. Something for those of you who just need something simple to get started with. Okay, here's a blank page in Notion. So literally I just went in. I'm not in any of my, sophisticated operating system that I've created. This is essentially what it'll look like if you just started a Notion account today and you're literally on your first blank page. And let's say the whole reason you're here is you've decided that you need to track a CRM, and for whatever reason you don't like any of the ones that are out there, or you just don't feel like paying for one. So we're going to create our own. And by the way, the reason I created my own in Notion, even though there are a lot of good choices out there, is because I built a whole operating system, which among many other things, I wanted to include my contacts database, because what you'll start to learn about Notion is how beautifully you can link things together. So by having my contacts in a database in Notion that is linked to other databases, and even if it's not linked to other databases, I can tag a person to mention them and it'll pull up their page. So let's start off by calling this my CRM, right? Very, very original. Okay, as you'll learn from me, if you spend a minute following any of my Notion content, the first thing you want to do is add an icon to something, so that when you're in any other area in Notion and you're trying to link to this page, that icon makes it very recognizable, because a lot of times you'll be looking at a sort of narrow view of a drop down of what that page is, and over time, as you hit a critical mass of pages in Notion, it's not necessarily going to be that easy to identify unless you take the time to do something like this. All that was to say this is a lot more important than you might realize on the surface. Okay, we'll add a cover. I'll change it. I'll just use something from Unsplash. Cookies. Cookies are good to share with contacts. Sometimes Notion is a little slow about updating that. Okay, now we're ready to start building. And the first thing we're going to do, and you know, maybe almost ironically, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but what I'm about to do, even though the intention here is to show you something very simple for somebody who's just getting started with Notion, I'm about to kind of launch you into something that's a little more advanced. But if you're going to build a CRM, then I think it's important to go straight to the use of a database. I think it's important to use a database, and I think you'll see why as I go to set this up. So let's start off with the very basics. First, I'm going to hit /table. Okay, and you'll learn these slash commands. Notion is digital Lego, and what that means is it gives you the building blocks that you can use to bring together the information on a page that you want to compile, however you want to compile it. And the way to access the immense list of building blocks that Notion has to offer is by hitting that / key. Right? And then over time you start to learn the commands for the things you do frequently. Okay. Now notice here I've got a few options. I've got table, and then I've got a table view of a database and a table of contents. All different things. These first two are similar, but this is exactly not a database. It's just a simple table which has its use cases. What we want is this one, the table view of a database. Okay. And now the database itself needs a name. So I'll call it CRM. Right, maybe I'll call it Seth CRM for now, just to distinguish the database's name from the page, the name of the page that the database lives on. All right, the name is the name of the page, but in this case, that's what we're going to use as the name of the contact. Right, it makes sense. Each contact gets their own page. After that, we're going to just add the properties that we need to track the information that we need to track about any person that we choose to add in here, right? So properties in Notion are what in more classic sort of database language are called fields, right? And basically each row is a record, right? In this case, each row is a contact, and the properties of the fields are the pieces of information we want to describe about a contact. And the way I like to do this is I like to build it around real live data, right? Because it helps me visualize exactly what kind of information I want to include in this case, right? So let's start with myself, right? Let's say I was adding myself as a contact. Okay, what do I need to know? What would I need to capture? If I was going to create a form, and yes, there are form builder tools that you could link to this, right? So you can have people fill out a form to give you their contact information, and they're basically adding themselves to your CRM in a way where you've made it very easy, but that's beyond the scope of today's little talk here, right? So the first thing that comes to mind is probably my email address. So when I click the plus sign here, which is to add a new property, all the way to the right, I'm going to type email, and sure enough, there's a field type for email. And we're going to call it email because that's what it is. I can't think of anything better to call it. Okay? So I close that. The next thing that comes to mind is probably my phone number, and maybe I want to specify that it's my mobile number. So I type mobile. It doesn't know automatically what to call that. So it assumes a text field. You wouldn't know this, but I recognize this icon here is telling me that the type of field it's about to create is a text field. But I also know that it has a special field type for phone. So let's type phone instead. And sure enough, there it is. And then I don't care about any other number anybody has today besides their mobile. I just want their mobile because I want to be able to text them, basically, right? And that brings up the next thing that I want to add to this, that no CRM, even paid ones that I've seen, actually have. And I don't know why they haven't had it, because I think it's so useful, which is as follows. So we're going to call this the MOC, or mode of communication. Okay. Initially, I'll let it add it as a text type. Now I'm going to change it, and I want to change it to a select. And that means I can add options. In other words, I've just created a drop down where I can add options. So what are my options? text. In other words, how do I communicate with this person? I don't know about you, but you can name like 10 people I know, and immediately what comes to mind is probably the 10 different ways I communicate with each of those 10 people. Some people, you know, force me into email, and I live with that. A lot of people I communicate with are in Slack. Some people text. Some people Facebook Messenger, right? There's certain, mostly personal friends, but certain other people that when I think of where do I go to communicate with them, it's in Messenger. And the reason this is important is not the ones like the 10 that I can think of right away, but there's other people where maybe I haven't talked to them in a while, and when I go and I realize I want to reach out to them and maybe suggest we schedule a call because it's been a while, the next thing I want to know is, wait, how do I normally talk to this person, right? So that's where this concept was born. So let's just quickly add in a few options: text, Slack, Facebook Messenger, right? WhatsApp, right? I talk to a lot of people in WhatsApp, again, mostly personal. And we can choose, by the way, to sort this alphabetically, right? And you can also change the color. So like WhatsApp's color is green, right? You're not going to be able to match it exactly, but you know, enough to sort of get the representation down, right? Facebook is blue, Slack is like a bunch of different colors. So just pick something that's not one of the others, right? And text is fine as yellow for me, right? So if I was going to talk to myself, I'd probably send myself a Slack message in Slackbot, right? Email Seth@nerdenterprises.com. For the mobile number, you can choose how you want it formatted. I highly recommend you stick with a convention. Like, just come up with a convention and stick with it. I am sort of a classic guy when it comes to this. I like it in this classic format. Okay, if you prefer the dots or anything else, that's fine. I don't care what you do, as long as you're consistent, because what's important to realize is you're building a database, and the more consistent you are with something like this, the cleaner the data will be. It's more pleasing to the eyes, but it's also easier to kind of see what you're looking at. You know, when things are messy, at least in my experience, and you're talking about data which could get voluminous over time, I look at something like that and I think it's just hard to look at, right? So keep that in mind when you're dealing with something like a phone number, right? And again, I only care about the mobile phone. If you like to keep track of like an office line, then here's a trick. Right click the field that's already most of the way there, duplicate it, click on it again here, office phone, boom, done. Now, the next part of this is you might want to keep track of information like phone calls that you've had with the person, right? So let's say you wanted to do that. I'd open this up, right? And I'm going to control click on this open in full page option. So it opens up in its own tab, right? Every new page by default in Notion, by the way, comes kind of narrow. So anybody who's watched any of my Notion videos will realize and learn and expect by now that the first thing I do is click. I just prefer the serif font, but more importantly is full width. And over here, in any number of ways, I can start keeping track of conversations I had with myself, right? So I can put something like a call out here. Okay, we'll choose call out, and I'll just put in at today. Had a talk with myself and thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, but that's going to take up space on a page after all, especially if it's somebody I'm talking to frequently. So there's another block, another type of block in Notion. Remember, this is digital Lego. These are blocks that we're going to use to put together. Is something called a toggle, right? So I'll start a toggle list, and maybe at tomorrow, right, I'm going to have a conversation with myself. Notice what it does. A toggle list works like bullet points, but the difference between a toggle and a bullet point is this can be expanded so I can include details. So we'll discuss X, Y, and Z. Okay, and then I can come back up here and zip it up. So this conserves space, right? You can also put things in columns. So if I decide I want to put this all the way to the right here, I can do that. So maybe this, instead of being where I would log a call, this might be like notes, like sort of big picture notes, and I can change the icon to reflect that. right? And then I can just make this nice and big. Okay, and then watch this trick. All right, I'm just going to give you some like bonus tips here. So this way you can really kind of take off and run with this if you want to. So I just highlighted this whole block, right? You can see how it's sort of shaded. Control D to duplicate. This might be something I would say is calls, right? And let's put in a phone icon. Okay. And we're going to take this and move it over here. And this is what I love about Notion, is it's so versatile. You're witnessing how easy it is to just move things around so I can evolve stuff as I use it more and more, and as I fill more and more things in, right? And now that I've got these columns, I can change the column sizes, right? But basically now I've got a cool little layout where here I can put like high-level notes. You know, at some point I might come in here and again, I can say at today, right? Just to kind of put a timestamp on there. Then I can click back on this and I get a full dialogue, and I can say actually include a time, right? 12 p.m. let's say. And I can even have it remind me about this if I want to put a time or a date that's sometime in the future, right? But I can put that in here and just make notes. Notes about how close I am to closing this prospect, right? And I'm using language and use cases that are often associated with CRMs, where you're trying to keep track of prospects and conversations you've had, and you know, really focus, put a lot of emphasis on what you need to do next to kind of move this thing forward and hopefully get the person as a client or a member or whatever they are to you once they become a paying customer of some kind, right? So this is a cool way to lay out calls. The way that I haven't shown you that I actually would do if it were me, but again, it gets more advanced, is you could actually build a database on this page. And for that matter, you create a template for every new contact, right? So that would back up here. Let's back up to my CRM. I can actually go over here and build a template, and I would call it new contact. And that would be what would get used every time I add a new contact here. And within that template, I can build a database and call it like a call log, right? Which is actually, well, here I can show you exactly what this looks like because it's what I have in my own. But again, it's more advanced for another day. But if I go over here and I say new contact template, right? In other words, that's what I want to use to add a new contact. Okay, and it automatically loads in a fresh database. It's called contact log. I would probably replace this with the person's name, so it would be like Seth David contact log or something. And over here, the name would not be the person's name. This would be more like, you know, the name of the conversation. And, you know, I would add tags for key topics that might have been discussed. I might even just make it, I name it like call at today or call on, you know, March 15th, whatever it is. I would name this so it's very clear. These are the notes from a call on a particular day. I don't need the contact's name because I'm in the contact, right? And so that's the sort of more sophisticated way to do it. But if you're looking just to get set up very simply, then what I would have you do is follow these kind of steps. You know, start with your blank page, right? Add a database table, name the database, add a contact in, and build your fields around that context. And you've seen a few types now. Obviously, there's the email, there's a phone number, there's a single select where you choose one option. You can also do a multi-select, right? So if you click this plus sign, similar to how I told you to hit the / and study what's available in your list of blocks to choose from, the same is true here. These are all the properties or fields you can choose from. These are all the things, the types of things you can use to describe information about a contact in this case, right? And remember, this is for any kind of database, not just CRMs. So there may be things that don't apply. And, you know, like, I don't know how you might use a formula on a contact, but the idea is that this is just a database that we happen to be using to describe information about a contact. So you're not going to use all of this, right? But there might be used for a multi-select where you can choose multiple options, right? Because then once you start adding that kind of context around contacts, you can filter this, you can filter your CRM for whatever criteria there are that you want to use to sort of chisel people down into groups of how they kind of logically are woven together, whether it's all your prospects, all your hot prospects, and so on. And that reminds me, one last thing. So how did I do the prospects thing? That I probably should show you since I showed it to you earlier. What that is a certain type of field in Notion called a status. Most people in most databases or CRMs or programs, what you're going to do for a status is something that's like a select or a multi-select, where it more likely be a single select, where you're going to choose the status as either a hot prospect, a cold prospect, or prospect won or prospect lost, and so on. And since this is, and in my experience, many people, when they use a CRM, it's not just for prospects, it's for their whole contact list, right? It's your digital Rolodex, basically. So what I decided to do, and you may or may not like this option. If you don't, you can certainly use a select or a multi-select to describe the status. Okay, but there's a type in Notion, a type of property called a status. What I like about it is that it automatically groups things into 3 major categories: to do, in progress, or complete. I like this for statuses in terms of context, especially for the prospect use case for the sales pipeline, because this allows me to create statuses that are grouped like this. And of course, that's going to flow through as I create it here. And of course, once you've set this up, you edit the property and add in your options, right? And then very quickly going back to mine, I'll show you what options I have set up, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I have been going on for like 20 minutes here. All right, contacts. And let's go into a new contact, and let's find the status. And here's what I've got. So to do, they're either a prospect that's hot or cold, and that's in the to do category because these are people I need to follow up with, right? In progress would be any of these others. So if it's not a prospect, but I'm adding it in directly as a client or any of these other things, that's what I've got under in progress. And under complete, also limited prospect loss. I don't have prospect one because that they're going to be a client. Okay, and then done just means for whatever reason, I'm done with the person. It's not somebody I expect to need to contact in the future, but I don't want to delete their information. And rest in peace, unfortunately, is because I have contacts who have passed away, and I'm weird and sentimental, and I don't have the heart to delete them. So I just created that status for people like that who just meant a lot to me. So there we go. I ended the whole thing with a tear jerker. Now hopefully you get it, though. Hopefully there's people out there besides me who think this way and do things like this, and if not, that's okay. I can accept the fact that I'm weird. That, my friends, is how I would have you make a beginning at building a CRM that's totally free. All of the stuff I've shown you, you can do in a free Notion account, and as long as you don't need collaborators, then it'll work just